Joining us now, Trump campaign senior advisor and daughter-in-law to the president, Lara Trump. Lara, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Chris.
Let's start with the president's health. His doctor put out a memo yesterday that said this: he is no longer considered a transmission risk to others, but it doesn't say that he tested negative. Lara, is your father-in-law now free of the coronavirus? Is it gone?
Well, according to the White House medical staff, it sounds like that's the answer. Obviously, working at the campaign, we do not conduct any testing on him ourselves. So if the White House doctor says that he is free of transmission, I think that sounds like he's done with the coronavirus, and by all accounts, he should be able to go out and get back on the road campaigning. He certainly should be able to do a debate on October 15th, but we know the debate commission decided against that. They wanted it virtual. But it sounds by all accounts like he is free of the coronavirus.
Okay. We'll get to the debate in a moment. As we said just a moment ago, the president held an event on the South Lawn of the White House yesterday, and while people were not socially distanced, many, but not all, were wearing masks. Having said that, that's a lot better than 2 weeks ago at the event for Judge Amy Coney Barrett, where people were packed in, almost no masks, and Dr. Fauci has said that that event was a super spreader. Question: why did it take the president getting COVID for the White House to take the CDC safety guidelines more seriously, although even yesterday they were still violating some?
Well, at that Amy Coney Barrett event, look, I think most of those people, if not all of those people, were tested for coronavirus before sitting down for that event. And you never hear, Chris, on the other side of the coin, the fact that we have had in this country since really the height of the COVID days, these demonstrations across America, riots in the streets, peaceful protests, some of them, many of them not peaceful, all across America, but you never hear any concern after these things about those being super spreader events. I have yet to hear one doctor say anything about them. I have yet to hear one media outlet say anything about those. It doesn't seem like coronavirus would have a political agenda, but oftentimes it feels like it does, because those events are never talked about as being an issue. So look, the White House has always followed guidelines. They've always either tested people before they're around the president, or whenever there's not testing available for the number of people that are there, encourage people to wear masks. And honestly, if we all look at this from the same perspective, it doesn't seem right that we're criticizing one event and not another.
Well, I take your point about the protests, but that doesn't make what happened at the White House, which, as I say, Tony Fauci says was a super spreader. At least 8 people at that event later came down with the virus, including the president and the first lady. I got to ask you, because you were there, about another event, which was the first debate 12 days ago in Cleveland. The Cleveland Clinic's rules were very clear. Everyone in the audience had to wear a mask, but after the first family came in with masks, you all took them off. Did you think, Lara, that the rules that applied to everybody else in that hall didn't apply to you?
Well, of course we didn't think that. And first of all, I'll say that everyone in there, Chris, was tested and tested negative for COVID, at least in our family, before we even got on the plane to head out to Cleveland. And we walked in with the masks on. We sat down. All of the seats were socially distanced. And I've heard you actually say this many times. I want to be very clear. Never one time did anyone from Cleveland Clinic come up and ask any member of our family to put a mask on. So that is totally false. I know that notion has been out there. That is not true. We were respectful to people around us coming in. We wanted to do that, to walk in with the mask on. We sat down. We didn't move from those seats until the very end, until it was all over. And we felt like we were being safe. Those are the same guidelines applied to restaurants. Those are the same guidelines applied to many outlets across America. And the fact that we had tested negative, Chris, I mean, you know, look, we followed the rules that as we thought that they were given to us.
Well, I don't want to belabor this. I'm going to move on. But everybody in that hall had tested negative. I had had a test 3 days before. You couldn't get in the hall without testing negative. And the fact is, the rules were everybody except for the president, the vice president, and I were supposed to wear masks, and it was the Pool report. I'm not just making this up. The Pool report says that a member of the Cleveland Clinic, and in fact, there's video that exists coming up to somebody in the presidential party and saying, would you like masks? And they were waved away.
Well, they didn't ask any member of our family. What I understood afterwards is that Colby Covington, who was sitting behind me, had a MAGA mask on, and they didn't appreciate that, apparently. So I think they were coming up to offer him maybe a different mask. That's all I can tell you about it. But never once, Chris, was anybody from our family asked to put a mask on.
I want to ask you about some of the president's actions this week. On Tuesday, he tweeted this. I'm going to put it up on the screen. I have instructed my representatives to stop negotiating on COVID relief until after the election, walking away from talks with Nancy Pelosi. By Friday, the president was saying this.
I would like to see a bigger stimulus package, frankly, than either the Democrats or the Republicans are offering. I'm going in the exact opposite now, okay?
How could the president go in 3 days from saying that the top offer was $1.6 trillion to, on Friday, 3 days later, saying he wanted to do more than Nancy Pelosi's $2.4 trillion, which now Republicans are rejecting as far too much?
Well, I think first and foremost, let's point out the fact that I think most people can agree Nancy Pelosi was not serious about this negotiation. This was a liberal wish list, as have they all been when it comes to these stimulus bills with Nancy. You know, defunding the police, bailout money for states that were in huge deficits well before COVID hit any of them, trying to bail them out for their bad decision making from Democrat governors. And look, the president is entitled to change his mind. I haven't specifically talked to him about this, but, you know, maybe he got some different information. I can tell you, Chris, the bottom line is that he wants what is best for the American people. You saw the way he pushed forward the Paycheck Protection Program in the middle of COVID to make sure that small businesses could stay afloat, that people could weather the storm. This is no different. He understands that there are people out there who desperately need this money, but it feels like the Democrats and Nancy Pelosi are yet again playing politics, and that is not what we need right now.
I got one last question. We got one last minute to talk about it. When the Commission on Presidential Debates announced this week that it was going to change the debate that, as you mentioned, was supposed to come up on Thursday the 15th from in-person at town hall to a virtual town hall, the president immediately pulled out. That debate has now been canceled. I understand why the president would have preferred an in-person debate, but that wasn't what was on the table. Didn't he make a mistake? Regardless of what you think of the commission, didn't the president make a mistake because he's now lost one of his last two chances to confront Joe Biden on camera?
Well, I don't think so. Look, I think a virtual debate is just a complete disaster, quite frankly. We see even now when we're talking, there's a delay in communication. This is how it goes virtually. You cannot have a legitimate debate with somebody virtually. And I know, look, who's to say what happens on the other end of things, what happens on the Trump side, what happens on the Biden side? Nobody knows. These two men should be on stage. There is no reason that they shouldn't be. 175 doctors told the New York Post that they think that the president, without a doubt, should have been able to do this. It made no sense. And good for the president for calling it out. Why did the debate commission, Chris, decide early on, no, we're not going to add a fourth debate like the Trump campaign was pushing for because they didn't want to change the rules, they told us. Now they're willing to change the rules without reaching out to our campaign, made a split-second decision the day after the vice president had a very strong debate against Kamala Harris. It seems a little suspect to people, and I think a virtual debate is an absolute disaster. Good for the president for saying no, they need to be in person.
Lara, thank you. Thanks for your time this weekend. Always good to talk with you, and happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you, and happy birthday to you as well.